Hey guys, welcome to Boxing Squared for boxing news and views from around the internet. Two things I'm going to cover off on this video. Joseph Parker's camp is not looking at Oleksandr Usyk, not pursuing that fight, despite talk from Eddie Hearn saying that Parker is one of the three candidates for an Oleksandr Usyk fight. So we'll get to the details, what Hearn's saying and what Duco is saying in response. But also, Dominic Breazeale, he's interested in a Dillian Whyte fight. But there's a catch there. He is saying in the US is where he'd want it to be, and Dillian Whyte, if they can make a deal to fight in the US, can come get some, fight him, and they can square off. But Dillian Whyte has a date booked April 20th at the O2. Is this a negotiating tactic? Well, we'll talk about it. So buckle in. Let's go. And we're going to start with Joseph Parker. So his name has been connected to Oleksandr Usyk for about 3 or 4 months now, since the Tony Bellew win by Oleksandr Usyk, which was in the UK in November. Initially, Parker's name was floated as one of a couple of possible options that one Eddie Hearn had mentioned, but also fans were saying he should fight Oleksandr Usyk, that's a good fight for him. But it was shut down by Parker's promoter David Higgins almost immediately, saying that it wouldn't have the sort of money, the payday that they were looking for if they were to have that in the UK. Two foreign fighters probably couldn't get the pot that they'd be looking for, didn't think it was going to be commercially viable. And that was despite Parker actually on social media liking posts and saying he'd be interested in that fight. And then in early January, we had the sort of Parker's name connected to Usyk again. But this time it was K2 promoter Oleksandr Usyk. Because remember, K2 is working with Matchroom. They have a co-promotional deal with Eddie Hearn. So Eddie Hearn has a vested interest in the future of Oleksandr Usyk, because what they're looking to do from, outside appearances is build him up for a couple of fights and then have a showdown with Anthony Joshua. Effectively, it would be an in-house fight if they can build a path to Joshua in the next year or so. But in respect of early January, Oleksandr Usyk came out and said 70% chance that Alexander Povetkin or Luis Ortiz would be the opponent. And there was also mention of Jarrell Miller and Joseph Parker, that they had turned down the fight. And that prompted Parker's promoter David Higgins to come out and sort of say, we haven't had any communication, we haven't had any approaches from these guys. So that video is up on the channel, so that's about a month or so ago now. And I actually said it was a bit of a storm in a teacup, given that Higgins had already sort of put the kibosh on it in November. Was it really going to happen? But now, so fast forward, we're in February 2019, Eddie Hearn talking to Fight Hype about Usyk's potential opponent for a likely May debut at heavyweight in the United States. Hearn saying, it'll be in America. We're looking at Povetkin, Parker and Ortiz. With the Dillian Whyte card, it looks like it's going to be what is confirmed at the O2. We've got Povetkin, Parker, we've got all those guys in the mix for that card. We've got to see who wants to take on Usyk. He's up for fighting Ortiz, Parker, Povetkin, all those guys. There's a little bit more about Eddie Hearn saying that, Usyk's a dangerous opponent, and I wouldn't want to face those guys if I was him, but this is what he wants to do, yada, 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 all that sort of stuff. He does have a vested interest in bigging up Oleksandr Usyk. But it appears there is a lot of smoke and mirrors with some of these comments, because you may remember a month ago, Luis Ortiz's people also came out and said, we haven't heard from these guys. If Oleksandr Usyk is really serious about facing Luis Ortiz, he might want to get in touch. And Joseph Parker's people effectively said, we've had zero communication from them. And on the back of this, Parker is in the mix for an Oleksandr Usyk fight in May. I went to Duco. This is their statement. A possible fight with Usyk has been touted before, but we haven't had any discussions with Usyk, and it isn't something we're pursuing. Pretty definitive stuff. That is not a fight they're pursuing. They've had zero contact from Oleksandr Usyk or his people, and that includes Eddie Hearn from, what we can take from the statement. His name is just being bandied around along with Luis Ortiz and Alexander Povetkin. And if we're to look at that actually and analyze it, if Parker hasn't been communicated with for an Usyk fight, his name is just being used as one as possible opponents, but there's nothing there. It's just all smoke and mirrors. It's all just hype. And Luis Ortiz, he's got a fight scheduled for March 2nd with Christian Hammer. His people said a month ago, there's been no contact. If they want to fight us, actually get in contact with us, and we can probably assume there has also been zero contact, so that really leaves Oleksandr Povetkin. And this is what I said a month ago. This looked like the most likely opponent for his first fight at heavyweight. So I still think Oleksandr Povetkin is the front runner, but he's under a different promotional banner, and obviously they're going to have to work out some sort of deal. Oleksandr Povetkin has left his options open about what he's going to do, saying he could fight in the UK in April or May, but also he could fight in the US in April or May. He's basically sort of saying, that's the time period which I'm looking to fight. Nothing is cemented yet, but we will get a deal done to fight in one of the two places in about that time period. But yeah, I just wanted to come out with this news because Joseph Parker is not in the running for Oleksandr Usyk. We can put that behind us. We haven't had any discussions with Usyk. This is what Duco Events is saying, and it isn't something we're pursuing. And what David Higgins said back in November, if there wasn't going to be enough money for a UK fight, they didn't think there was the sort of payday that they were looking for or chasing, I don't think there would be the sort of payday in the United States either for that similar fight, because they are not from the home country. And obviously Duco has an interest in Parker to try and get him the biggest paydays, you know, and also trying to position him towards a title. And just even on the face of it, an Usyk fight is a dangerous fight for anyone, let alone Joseph Parker. But Usyk's going to step up and, in my view, be an instant contender. He's going to give a lot of guys a lot of trouble. But this is all moot because they're not even considering this fight. They have had zero contact from the Oleksandr Usyk camp, and that extends to Eddie Hearn, who is co-promoting Oleksandr Usyk. Okay, if we move to the second thing, Dominic Breazeale has expressed interest in fighting Dillian Whyte. Dillian Whyte has called Dominic Breazeale out as his top target for his April 20th date at the O2. Whyte is going to be fighting there. There's Dave Allen and Lucas Brown going to be on the undercard. There's been talk about Michael Hunter and Carlos Takam potentially being on that card. Maybe Oleksandr Povetkin on some sort of fight there. Also Joseph Parker and Derek Chisora. Those names have been mentioned as well, potentially fighting each other. We'll have to see what happens. There's a bit of water to flow under the bridge. And as I recently reported, Derek Chisora and Joseph Parker, there is some interest there for that fight, but there's only been one email sort of contacting Duco about that potential fight. But in respect of Dominic Breazeale, so he has told The Independent, people have talked about it for a while. I'm a fan-pleasing type of guy, so if that's what the fans want to see, I'm all for it. At the same time, I'm not going to pass up opportunities to fight for the WBC world title, to go down there to fight Dillian Whyte. I hope he does make some type of deal. He can come here to the United States and he can get all he wants of Dominic Breazeale. Quite interesting, and I actually just think a United States fight is really not workable. Especially not for Dillian Whyte, who has a date in place of April 20th in the United Kingdom. And let's face it, a UK-based fight for these two guys is going to be much bigger than a United States-based fight. It's going to be on pay-per-view in the United Kingdom. Whyte is now a pay-per-view fighter in the UK and also in other international markets, like where I am in New Zealand. I will have to pay for that Whyte and Breazeale fight should it be on pay-per-view. So there is more money to be made hosting it in the UK. And Dominic Breazeale, he will know this. In the United States, it's more likely that this would just be on a Fox card, for example, headlining there, or even on the undercard as a chief support of a pay-per-view event or something similar. They're just not going to be able to hold this fight in the United States and get the same sort of money that they would in the UK, given it would be on pay-per-view. And they would be headlining that bill definitely in the UK. And what I really think this boils down to is Dominic Breazeale knows he's the top target. He knows he's got a bit of leverage here. He will want to get as much as possible. I do think this is a flat-out negotiation tactic. And we have to remember there's this other situation with the WBC. So he is the WBC mandatory challenger. He's not going to just sort of sell that cheaply. Even though Dillian Whyte would be the commercial A-side here, Breazeale can really sort of exploit what he's got going to probably get an almost even split with Dillian Whyte here. And also, just remember, if Deontay Wilder and Tyson Fury fight, that could potentially open up a fight for Dominic Breazeale for an interim world title. And the guy he would likely face would be Dillian Whyte. And if the WBC ordered that, Dominic Breazeale would likely get a bigger cut off the pie than Dillian Whyte. So it is in Whyte's interest to get a deal in place before the WBC orders that fight, because then obviously they have zero control over the purse split, but also it leaves it open to a purse bid and who knows where it would go. I still think it makes much more sense in terms of the fighters, their purses, to have it in the UK, but who knows, if it went to purse bid, it could wind up in the United States being a main event on a card somewhere. We'll have to see. But Dominic Breazeale, I think he is playing hardball here because he knows he's got some leverage here. He is the WBC mandatory challenger. That is something the #1 rated contender in Dillian Whyte has been seeking. He wants that. He's been the #1 rated contender in the WBC for some time. Dominic Breazeale is currently rated 4th, but he has that mandatory status. And with a likely interim title fight going to be ordered at some point by the WBC, he will know that Whyte will probably want to give him a bigger cut just to ensure that they get the fight made, and then the WBC could come in later after Wilder Fury is made. They make their resolution for Breazeale and they slap an interim world title status on the Whyte and Breazeale fight. So I think there is definitely some maneuvering going on here, but it's not going to happen in the United States, you know, in all likelihood. And Breazeale will know this, that the most money will be made in the United Kingdom, but he wants to really exert some pressure here, and he's got some leverage. So Dominic Breazeale won't just roll over and sign for anything. He will push this and push it hard. And this is the guy Dillian Whyte wants to fight. And because he's so publicly made this call for Dominic Breazeale, it's, you know, that in itself also gives Breazeale a little bit more bargaining power, you know, at the table. So we'll have to see where it goes. What do you make of it all? Drop a comment, loud and often. Hit like, hit subscribe, follow me on Twitter, boxing_squared. I'm out.